Welcome to episode 30 of Cyclops is Waiting For Me, an X-Men animated series weekly recap podcast.
Woo! Episode 30. We actually got to 30. Holy.
Almost halfway. We're approaching.
Yeah, we're approaching.
I'm Rod. I'm very good at speaking.
And I'm JC. I'm also great at speaking. I don't know how we made it to 30 episodes and you haven't killed me yet. Cyclops is Waiting For Me is our weekly podcast series. We're going back and watching every single episode of the original 1992 X-Men, the animated series, in their original intended script order, building up to the release of X-Men 97, which is coming out to Disney Plus in 2023. And for those of you who are wondering how we determine the order of our episodes, we utilize the listed order in Previously on X-Men, the making of an animated series by the showrunner Eric Lewald. And that is also a list that is available and referenced on Wikipedia, which I trust Wikipedia on this one way more than I trust IMDb. Also, interestingly enough, we found there's a fun tidbit about this show of the location, and they refer to the Savage Land as an island. And I'm pretty sure somebody thinks Antarctica is just an island. At that point, when it's that big, it's no longer an island.
I'm trying to think of 90s education, like how that...
Pluto is a planet. Pluto isn't a planet. Antarctica is an island. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll want to reference that script order a lot.
Basically for the rest of the series.
Yeah, because it's already come into play the last few episodes, but it gets really confusing. It's already been confusing.
But the good part is we literally put the title of the episode in our episode title, so that will make it easier for you to find.
Some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that came out 28 years ago. Is that correct? 28?
Yeah, I actually,
okay.
I did the math on this one. Yeah. Previous episodes, some of them were happening out of script order by like 2 years. Some were aired during season 5 instead of season 3. This one, actually 28 years. It's like...
Actually in season 3.
I think it's like a month off of being 28 years exactly.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
Nailed it.
Awesome. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the episodes, and come back. We'll do our best to avoid mentioning anything about future episodes we haven't covered yet. And we're currently not sponsored or affiliated with Disney or Disney Plus in any way. But if you decide you want to cater to that, is our demographic? I don't know. Whatever we are, hit us up. DMs are open.
Elder millennials. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on whatever your favorite podcast service is. Finally, we record these episodes in batches. We are way ahead of whatever is happening in real time. So there is not news for us to react to. If there is, that's something epically important. I will have Rod remotely record stuff and add it in later. But yeah,
there was the little action figure announcement.
Right. There's the action figure announcement of Mystique. That dates us of being 2 months ahead of recording schedule, Rod. Thank you for pulling the curtain back.
Now onto the show. Today we're going to be talking about season 3, episodes 12 and 13, titled Savage Land, Savage Heart.
Nope.
Wait, Strange Heart.
No, you keep that in, because that's... finish your episode intro, and then we will go right into one of the fun facts.
Savage Land, Strange Heart, part 1 and 2. They aired on September 10th and 17th, 1994, and currently sit at a 7.1 and 7.2 star rating on IMDb, respectively.
So that is actually one of the bits of trivia about these episodes. The original name was Savage Land, Savage Heart on the DVD.
That's what I'll say it was.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't looked at the DVDs in like 10 years.
You saw the physical DVDs that I brought back from Connecticut.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I used to own the set, but it's been a long time since
And you were studying every episode name.
Anyway, so John pointed out something interesting about this, which I wasn't sure if I just missaw it. But the very first thing we see is a satellite. I thought that was a mistake, but it might not be.
Yeah, there's this little green spaceship that is just seen for like a half a second that looks like footage of a satellite being released from a larger ship.
Yeah.
And then I've already started watching for our next set of recording, which is the Dark Phoenix saga. And that clip also starts out one of the other episodes too.
So interesting. No, there's a couple of things like that happen in this. We're like, okay, that's going to be something.
Or it was an error and we're giving too much credence to it.
What's weird is it didn't seem like a glitch. It just seemed like something, that was just, it like transitioned well, like technically.
I don't know. It's there for such a short, quick flash that's only a second and a half long. So I feel like even in the other episode where it airs, and this may be just a Disney Plus issue because I haven't put the DVDs in to double check to see if this is a reoccurring thing, but it just is like so fast. And it's like, well, was that intentional or not?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the weird part of my brain noticed a few weird things with the traditional animation in this. Like there's a part in this episode where like the Blackbird's landing.
Yeah.
And you can track a piece of dust elsewhere on the cell. like on the far corner that's also landing at the same rate.
We should go to one of those booths at Comic-Con, and by we I mean me, and see if I can find said cell, because there are all those booths that sell the original animation cells from the shows. Yeah, maybe I'll pick one up this year at Comic-Con. I'm out of wall space. I don't know where the hell I'm going to put it, but we'll figure it out.
On the floors and ceilings.
Yeah, I start just plastering my ceiling with everything.
So anyway, besides the satellite, it opens up with a battle in the Savage Lands between the Fall people and Sauron's army, I guess.
Yeah, the people who are still kind of like still enslaved by Sauron, essentially.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of a struggle, but overall the Fall people are winning. There's a funny moment, though, where like the Fall people are using like catapults with rocks on fire.
Yep.
So Sauron's team's counter is literally just baskets of water. They drop out of the sky.
Right, which I appreciated the idea of like, well, we have to put out the fire. It's still a heavy rock that can do damage from the catapult, right?
So in the fight, Sauron...
And you didn't call them our favorite name.
Oh, the Skyriders.
Yep.
Yeah, when combined.
Rod gave me a look like I was saying something offensive. He's like there was a moment of fear in his eye when I said that.
Like, hey, wait, what do we call them now? Apple polishers. I think that's still my favorite. That doesn't sound like it's overly offensive. It's a really great combination of words. So in the fight, Sauron's kind of like weakened. So he goes inside the temple. He's confronted by Ka-Zar in there.
Well, not the temple. It is the base of operations that Mr. Sinister had previously set up.
It's like his rebuilt fortress, I guess.
Yeah, let's go with fortress, because it has a giant moat around it, right, Rod?
Dinosaur River? I don't know.
Rod still doesn't believe me that was a lake and not a moat. Yeah. But anyway.
So he's inside and he's confronted by Ka-Zar. They barely get to start fighting when Ka-Zar is interrupted by a woman who we find out very quickly is named Zaladane.
Yeah, she shoots him from behind. We've also seen this in the show before, is like people getting shot from behind, like Xavier got shot from behind and like the Lilandra, Black Tom Cassidy incident and such. So we're like, oh, who's this? And I had forgotten a lot about this episode. Yeah. So because it was still Savage Land, I was like, oh, is it Sinister back? And then, of course, we get the quick reveal of Zaladane, who I have zero experience with this character from the comic book side of stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it. I don't even remember watching her in the show. I remember elements of these episodes, but I don't remember her. So I'm assuming she doesn't really come up again.
Her aesthetic is very much like a lady who really likes chicken outfits.
I can see that.
Like they're
she's like bird person, people from Rick and Morty.
Yes. That's a very good descriptor.
Or is it the sorceress from Masters of the Universe?
Tila?
No, I think it's
Tila's mom.
Is that Tila's mom? The sorceress, the one that literally dresses up as a bird.
Spoiler for Masters of the Universe. Tila's mom.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I
think she's literally called the Sorceress, and Tila's her daughter.
Okay, gotcha. I don't remember much of the storyline from the 80s.
We don't remember much of the storyline from the show that we're talking about.
So she reveals that she's the high priestess of the sun god Garrock. I thought this was going to be code for someone we've already met, like Apocalypse or Sinister.
Right.
Just as a new villain, because they don't have enough problems in this universe. And
which is a comic book problem. Like, I mean, you look at the X-Men and you start looking at the size of their, all the extended X-family teams, whether it's the X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, X-Ternals, etc. While the etc. was not intentional, and I hate myself for saying it out loud.
This is the part that's going to get clipped out.
Of course it is, because Rod's a piece of crap. But then you start looking at the family of villains that they have, and it is... For as many good mutants as there are apparently as many awful mutants, and then the people who aren't even mutants that hate them. Yeah. So, let's come up with more problems for them to deal with.
Like Canada.
Canada is the greatest enemy the X-Men will ever encounter, particularly Wolverine.
And they were super subtle about this villain because his name is Garrock, and he's literally rocks. So...
But it's funny that he's the sun god.
Right?
Yeah.
But he's like stuck in I don't know. I'm not going to think that much about it.
Only thing I will say, within 616 Marvel, we had to look this up.
Oh, yeah.
Zaladane, 2 words instead of 1. Zala, as opposed to everything all in one. And then Garrock in the Marvel comics is particularly called the Petrified Man. I didn't do further research to see if it was also the sun god, but I feel like they leaned in more for the rock side into the comics than they actually did in this one.
Yeah, Petrified Man actually makes more sense because it's a little bit more like it falls to like the Earth category thing.
Yeah.
So she like points her staff or wand or whatever at the ground and like unveils like a secret stairwell or something.
Right.
And as they're walking down, there's like a weird animation, I'm going to guess error. So by the time Sauron's walking down, you don't actually see him complete going down the stairs. He just kind of like fades away like I don't know what. Did they just like, we're not going to make it, so they just like fade him out?
Magic.
Yeah.
Sun god magic.
Right. Zaldane zaps Sauron while she's talking to him a little bit, and then like a medallion appears in her hand, so there's probably some magic happening there. As they're walking outside of the cave into like the outside area, Sauron starts turning back into Karl Lycos.
Right, so that's the part where we actually find a little bit more about Sauron, because in the previous episodes in the Savage Land where he is working alongside Mr. Sinister, we don't really know what his power is, because he's just doing the hypnosis at that point.
Yeah.
This is him needing to specifically absorb mutant life energy.
Yeah, to turn into Sauron.
Exactly. But he also denies the existence of Garrock. He basically says this is like a folk tale. This isn't something legitimate, like you're working for the boogeyman kind of thing.
I love, because this happens a lot in this episode, is like Garrock's not real. And it's like, in your world there are what things? Like there's like Apocalypse, there's Sinister, there's pterodactyls.
You're a guy who turns into a green pterodactyl.
And that's the thing that's not believable? I don't know. It was funny.
So one of the other fun facts of the episode, Karl Lycos is revealed to be Sauron's real name. The reason why he is named Lycos is in the comics, he was originally supposed to be a werewolf character as opposed to a half dinosaur man. And Lycos is a toss to lycanthropy, which is the disease which is believed to cause werewolfism.
Yeah. So that actually makes a lot more sense, because otherwise, I guess this is a nice surprise that Sauron, goes back and forth. I was like, what? I don't remember that being his power until this episode.
Wasn't there also like a thing when we were in the 90s that Lycos was like a search engine or something like that?
I forgot about that until just this moment.
It was like Yahoo, Alta Vista, and Lycos, and then Google ate all their lunches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Remember when Yahoo was the big search engine?
Mm-hmm.
And email server?
Mm-hmm.
Remember the days.
Yep.
I would say good old days, but yeah.
Those were days.
They were days. They did have a cool instant messenger.
They did. And then that died.
Yeah. Ask your parents about instant messenger. So Zaldane tells Karl, not Sauron, that Magneto left a mini jet there, conveniently, and that he needs to take it to get away, because otherwise if he stays in the Savage Land, then Ka-Zar is going to hunt him down for all the awful things he did to his people.
Right. And so Karl, not in Sauron form, gets into the jet and he boots up the system, and it revealed 4 locations. Did you see what those were, Rod?
I did not.
So
no, I saw Los Angeles at the top.
So Los Angeles at the top, Houston, Asteroid M, and New York City.
I didn't see Asteroid M.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wait, so all those things, spoiler for 10 seconds from now, all those things, and it went to the last location?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So right before the thing closes, she puts that medallion that appeared from whatever she did to him on, probably some sort of mind control thing.
I mean, I just got it as like, this is you're providing energy to Garrock. I didn't get it as like a control thing as much as a, like, I'm going to siphon your power, because that is like kind of the ultimate piece for Sauron, is like gaining power and siphoning it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the ship takes off.
Or it's like a rosary and it's just like an affiliation kind of scenario.
Yeah, it's just like, we need people to know that you're at the Church of Garrock. So say your memories are Hail
Rockies.
Celestials. Rockies, there you go.
Hail Rockies.
So it cuts to New
just
York.
Plays Eye of the Tiger.
Right, over and over. Survivor's getting that check. Oh, no. Yeah, Survivor. Survivor?
It was Survivor.
Okay.
Yep. Nobody listening knows what we're talking about.
Then we cut to New York City Comic-Con.
Yep, which I don't remember if there was a New York City Comic-Con way back then. Years later, we would get New York Comic-Con in the early 2000s, which is still one of the biggest conventions in the country. But there was also a great Stan Lee reference on there where the sign said New York City Comic-Con, Nuff Said. And Nuff Said was a Stan Lee thing.
Oh, I didn't know Nuff Said was one of his things.
Yeah, it was Excelsior and Nuff Said.
Okay,
yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it does. That had to have been just an Easter egg, because it literally plays nothing into the story from this point on.
It just shows us that they've specifically landed in New York City.
Yeah.
And the camera pans over, and they're by Central Park.
Yeah, where Rogue and Storm are horseback riding. I don't know if Central Park does horseback riding. Every time I've been to New York, that wasn't happening, but these are the X-Men. Who knows?
I mean, Central Park has tons of stuff. Like, Central Park has a full-fledged zoo within it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a small area within Central Park that does
do that.
All right, well, keep going. I'm going to research live on the show. This is how you can tell we don't talk about enough stuff beforehand, because I'm literally researching as Rod is saying stuff.
This whole horseback riding thing, it seems like Rogue and Storm are just getting some like girl time in. And they're talking a little bit, and we catch the tail end of their conversation where Rogue was telling Storm, like, sometimes you just need to, like, let go and let loose. It's funny because for a kid's show, I know that what they mean is, like, have fun every once in a while, Storm. We find out that later she actually means, like, get angry sometimes, Storm.
There is horseback riding in Central Park.
Oh, there you go. Learn something new every day. Yeah, just judging by some of Rogue's one-liners in previous episodes and just the talk they're having, it sounds like Rogue's like, Storm, you need to get laid ASAP. But I know the kid show is like, have some emotions sometimes, you know? Storm kind of like starts to shame Rogue. She's like, I don't have it as easy as you do, where I don't have to keep my feelings in check. It's like, all right, bitch, you can go ride the rest of this trail alone then.
Well, also, you're saying this to the person who literally can't make human contact? Yeah. Like, okay.
And has had just as many breakdowns because of the people she's absorbed and stuff like than as Storm. Anyway,
yep.
It was just interesting.
One of the most violent screams in the entire show is when Rogue screams.
Yeah,
so
which happens again in this pair of episodes. Then we're in the subway where we catch up with Carl, who's gotten down there somehow. He starts sucking life out of just a person at a turnstile. He doesn't kill him because the guy seems to be getting up after he turns away.
Yeah, it takes a quick hit.
Yeah, just to stay alive. It sounds like he needed to kind of like stay alive or like remain mobile or whatever.
I also got a little bit of like the dude's kind of an addict for life energy too. It's like he's coming off of being this super powerful being, so his body like.
Yeah,
he's like, oh, I don't have my drugs, so I'm just going to do a whip it right now.
And I know that you didn't see It's Morbin Time, but like this is very much that story too.
We're not going to talk about that piece of shit on this show, Rob.
That's why I said it by its code name. But it was essentially saying because Carl even says like I'm no better than a vampire, and he walks up out of the subway and passes a museum,
which I think is the same subway that we've seen used multiple times, like the Morlocks episode. That's like that is that specific entrance that they love to show in the show.
The Japanese subway in New York.
Yeah, but it's the particular like entranceway to the subway.
Same one, yeah.
Because most of the ones that I've historically gone down are just like it's kind of just like the rail around the edge and you just go downstairs. This one's a little bit fancy.
Yeah, it's got the little clamshell on it and stuff.
Yeah.
So he walks in front of a museum with a Cretaceous exhibit. We zoom into the museum and Wolverine, Jubilee, and Beast are there, and only Beast is enjoying it.
They make a flying turkey joke or flying chicken joke or something like that. They're just shit talking pterodons.
Yeah, and then Wolverine says that he doesn't like being around skeletons, which fair. Actually, for him, that's foreshadowing.
It is foreshadowing
because as we saw in Days of Future Past, doesn't turn out well for Wolverine.
It is a futuristic callback, which is not a thing.
Ooh, I'm gonna write that down for like an album title: futuristic callback.
But Beast is loving it, and while they're miserable about it, Beast is like, "Oh, cool! You want to go to like the Guggenheim next?"
Yeah. I get it that you're like family and stuff. Why do you bring these people to these things? Find there has to be other people that would want to.
Carly is still around,
right?
Like he's just that desperate. He's like, I don't want to go to the museum alone again.
Yeah.
Well, we also have to remember the last time we saw Beast in an art gallery, he creeped out that woman who was trying to like get away from him.
That's true.
And he wouldn't let her go. It was only when an attack happened that he actually let her go.
So that's just part of his personality. He's just like torturing people with
oblivious torture. Oblivious torture and future callback.
There you go.
Yep.
It's my metal albums.
More like synth pop, but yeah.
There you go. So they're leaving the museum and Wolverine notices a hot dog cart and he goes to buy a hot dog. Carl happens to be like crossing at the same moment and is begging Wolverine to help him. So Wolverine...
He assumes it's somebody who's looking for help with like food and stuff and Carl looks incredibly disheveled, so Wolverine assumes he's like one of the unhoused residents of New York kind of scenario.
And he needs like some money or something, so he's like reaching in his pocket for money or whatever. And then Carl just grabs his head and starts absorbing him, obviously freaking everybody out. So Beast breaks it up,
which, to be clear, transforms him into Sauron again. Yes. And you could actually tell how much like this is a split personality scenario because he says "free again," meaning that like. Kind of similar to like a Hulk scenario where he's like the personality trapped inside as opposed to it being like the same person, but just with power activated.
And it kind of reminds me of how, I'm not familiar with them in the comics, but the MCU version of Moon Knight is working where they can, like the alters can lock each other out.
I think it's a little more of like that is a conscious battle where this is just like their physical state is the, I think the physical state determines the personality in this case as opposed to Moon Knight where it's like, a battle of wills.
Yeah.
Because we haven't seen an example of Carl being in control as Sauron.
Yeah, that's true. Although he hints at it later, which is just like a throwaway line. I thought a funny detail of Carl turning into Sauron, they did a very like anime Sailor Moon kind of transformation.
Right.
Like he like zooms out, there's the solid background thing. And that comes up a little bit later, kind of just randomly.
Yeah.
That happens. Beast radios Rogue and Storm and is like, we got a problem. And Sauron actually flies over Central Park, so Storm and Rogue both see him, and Storm recognizes Sauron. And then Storm also like Sailor Moons into her outfit somehow.
We also get Rogue. She gives the somebody took a wrong turn at Albuquerque, which is a Bugs Bunny reference.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, yeah. Man, I don't remember these until like I hear them in context.
Yeah. That's like an old school animation reference.
That's so funny.
Which, out of the last 3 episodes, this is the second time there's been a Bugs Bunny reference because we had the That's All Folks in the Mojo episode.
Oh, yeah. And then there in the previous, I forget which one, but previous episode, there was like a He Don't Know Me Very Well kind of thing or something.
Oh, yeah.
Reference. Man, okay, so the writers like Bugs Bunny, which, solid cartoon. Storm's chasing Sauron through town or city or whatever. And she flies by, it looks like an animation office. And there's 2 people in there, and they were too prominent to not be cameos. I'm assuming there was somebody on the staff.
So I gathered because it was New York City, and in the 90s, Marvel was like at the top of their game. This was before the fall of the comic book industry.
Yeah.
And it was pre-Marvel Studios and stuff like that. So I assumed that was actually the Marvel editorial bullpen.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because there was 2 guys who, when they turned around, they were distinct faces.
They were animated to be people. Like, I don't know who they were. Eric Leewald has popped in on some of our Instagram posts. Like he confirmed that it was Jack Kirby in the Mojo Vision episode. Maybe he can drop us in because I don't believe that was mentioned in the book. So
Rod, when you're listening to this later, remember to tag the Leewalds and see if they can answer this question.
Yeah, we're gonna literally put a secondary Instagram post just for this.
But yeah, then they try to fight, and in the middle of that tussle, Rogue gets hypnotized by Sauron. Sauron makes Rogue see everybody as like monsters and kind of grotesque versions of
Storm literally becomes like a gross witch. And then Beast, Wolverine, and Jubilee on the ground are like monstrous versions of themselves. Yeah, it was like, we're gonna mess with your head kind of scenario.
Yeah. And so she's freaking out. You get that lovely scream that everyone loves from Rogue.
Especially Rod's cat.
Yeah. And so while all that's going on, Sauron catches up with Storm.
Right.
And hypnotizes her, but instead of doing the crazy, like, seeing things stuff, just puts her to sleep. Then Beast goes after Rogue and just drowns her to wake her up.
Shock to the system, I guess.
Yeah, I get what it is. It's like, oh, you know, it's like throwing water in your face. But the image where he literally took his jacket off, covered her face, and then dragged her into a lake.
So water tortures her.
Yeah. But it snapped her out of it, so it did its job. Wolverine and Jubilee chase after the jet, but it's a little bit too late. They take off.
Sauron uses the Gara necklace, and that's what reveals the ship from coming up underground.
Oh, okay. And then Wolverine notices it's going due south, so he's like, only place that's got to be is like, also, where else have you seen Sauron?
I think that's the bigger tip-off.
Yeah. So then we're at the mansion. Everybody's like kind of caught up on stuff. So Beast, Wolverine, and Jubilee are getting ready to leave. Beast mentions that they can't get a hold of anybody at Muir Island, and Wolverine's like, they're running tests on Genie.
Yeah.
It took me a second to realize what we were talking about.
Right. So, you know, despite the fact that there have been 3 episodes in between, this is the first time where we've gotten reference after the Cyclops episode that Jean is still alive. We've got that revealed to us, but one, that they've found her and that they are doing something to help her.
Yeah, which is wild because literally the last time we heard about it, they were having a memorial service. Like,
yeah, the same episode.
She just died.
But we get a great moment where they've kind of like regrouped. They know they're going to have to go back to the Savage Land because they weren't able to get reinforcements. And, you know, Wolverine kind of like took control.
Yeah.
And there's the great quote of who died and made him Cyclops. And it's like, I literally said out loud, Jean died.
I did the same thing. I was like, Jean?
Yeah. Jean died. Sorry.
So at the Savage Land, Zaldane tells Sauron that Storm can be his unlimited source of energy, so he never has to fall back to Carl again.
And they actually create a second necklace in the Gara fashion line, and they put that on Storm.
And so Sauron hypnotizes Storm, tells her to let loose, let her emotions run free.
Release the tempest within was the great quote.
He knows his audience because Storm loves that shit. And
Storm loves that shit.
Right? You know, she's just sitting at home, like before she goes to bed, she's like writing all her like Shakespearean one-liners. And I imagine her with like a quill. I don't know why. Anyway,
you get high when you watch these episodes?
Sometimes.
Okay. Just checking.
So Storm says she's free. She's actually kind of seems happy about it.
Right.
She starts going berserk, but before she can actually like do anything, Sauron starts draining her like life force or whatever, and loves it.
Yeah, it could. They specifically referencing that it could sustain him for forever,
which was, I guess the idea was that she's renewable. Wow, was that a thing with the ecological? Nope. I just not put that together. Like she's a okay. I don't know. You know where I'm getting at. That's interesting. Before, when they caught her, I thought that meant that like he would absorb her powers once and then be sustained forever. But then you kind of quickly realize like, oh, they're just going to keep her in prison, and he's going to keep coming back to her.
Well, the funny thing is, the theory about it being sustainable for forever is we have no indication that she will have unlimited power for forever. Like, even though she's controlling the elements, doesn't it in theory take her energy to control the elements?
Yeah, she passes out several times while in flight and stuff.
Right.
Because I didn't, as much as I love Storm, as far as I'm aware, she's not like an Omega level mutant, right?
I think she might be an Omega.
Is she?
Oh.
Okay.
Well, Rod asking the questions.
Well, mainly because I started thinking she might be because of the way they were talking about her being able to like sustain Sauron forever, you know? But she doesn't exhibit anywhere near the same thing as like a Jean Grey or a Wanda Maximoff.
Yeah, she's Omega level.
She is. Wow. Okay. Nope. I mean, I guess that makes sense because you control the Earth essentially.
So
we don't know if it works out outside of Earth.
I mean, this is, unless they go down this route with X-Men 97, in the current X-Men stories, they literally terraform Mars.
Okay.
And it's Storm and Iceman who literally terraform the entire planet.
Okay.
So
there's a deeper science there.
The deeper science of Omega level mutants.
I mean, you know that some writer worked that logic out somewhere. I'm not going to look it up, but that's really cool. I love that Storm's Omega level. That's awesome. So I swear I love this show. I just don't know things about my favorite character.
At all. You don't. I'm sorry.
Anyway, so then in the Blackbird, it's starting to land in the Savage Land. Beast says something about they're able to track Storm because of her genetic frequency, which is kind of, I just assumed it was like a convenient MacGuffin.
Yeah, I think that's a MacGuffin.
Because like, oh, so you didn't need trackers this whole time? Okay, sure, whatever.
Right. But they see from the window, one of the giant Garruk faces in the ground. When somebody asks about it, there's kind of like this retcon of, oh yeah, Ka-Zar had mentioned that the last time we were here.
Yeah, and I didn't remember that.
That was a retcon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're like, off camera, Ka-Zar told us the whole story of Garruk.
Cave people.
Right. And so Beast says he's going to try to track her through her genetic frequency or whatever, and then Wolverine's like, I don't need that, so he starts sniffing around, and Jubilee's like, what'd you find? He's like, not Storm, and then a T-Rex runs out of the woods.
And then we get a save from Ka-Zar, who recognizes his friends. Jubilee refers to him as Barney.
Yeah, they just outright say it.
Yeah, this one they just went for it, but he wasn't purple, so they had to. And then they do a little like pit trap scenario. Of course, their pit traps don't have spikes, so the T-Rex isn't impaled. Damn. And we get a little bit of a flashback from Ka-Zar of like what happened after the X-Men left.
Yeah. And also, minor detail, but that does play into the story, is that Jubilee gets like knocked into a mud pit, and she makes a big deal of like people not caring about it or whatever. His whole like backstory thing picks up from the last time we left the Savage Land. Oh, and also Zabu, the saber-tooth tiger, comes in, and suddenly Wolverine's best friend.
Went through some shit together,
I guess. Huh. But the last time we saw him, like, Wolverine caused Ka-Zar to abandon Zabu in the middle of a war, essentially.
Right.
But it was really sweet because they cut from Wolverine running up to the Zabu like he's a dog to at the village where he's got his arm around him. It's like, has Wolverine just needed a pet this whole time?
Yes.
Which I get it.
Yes.
I mean, pets are great.
He needs a pet or he needs Jean, but he needs something.
So like let him take Zabu on the weekends or something.
Right.
I don't know. So he catches everybody up, basically saying that after they left, Sauron kind of like regrouped some soldiers or something and rebuilt Sinister's fortress thing. And
right. Well, we know that at the end of the episode where Sinister was seemingly destroyed and just sitting in the beach sand kind of scenario, Sauron basically was like, well, all the Outlanders are gone. Now it's our time to take back the Savage Land.
Yeah. And so while that was happening, a statue of Garruk appeared in the middle of the village. Ka-Zar said he was skeptical, but then like let it go, and then everybody started worshiping it. And it was like,
well, it kind of was seen as a rallying cry. So even if it wasn't something that he was necessarily excited about, it was helping keep morale up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of those, if you have people that are willing to fight this war where there's going to be casualties and stuff like that, you don't want to take away the thing that inspires them if they're on the same side as you.
Yeah, I get that. Although I'm with Ka-Zar on the point of like, anybody else have questions where this thing came from?
It's a god. Well, here's the thing. It's a god.
Yeah.
In their mind, it's a god. You don't question where did the god thing pop
true.
out of the ground.
I guess that's true. We didn't have TikTok therapy talk yet to sort out all that stuff, to deconstruct. So at that point, Jubilee says that nobody can make fun of her for her new outfit. And then she's like in a jungle bikini now.
Yeah, she's in a cave girl outfit, like straight up.
And I want to say this is so there had to have been some toy plans or something, because like otherwise this little minor storyline doesn't have another point. She got knocked into a mud pit and then had to change clothes.
I think it's they don't know what to Jubilee, so they make her the like butt of certain jokes because she's the kid.
Yeah.
And it's easy to laugh along with the kid.
Yeah.
That's the only way I do it, because they weren't going to plan a single toy off of a single episode appearance of an outfit. Like even the Wolverine Weapon X outfit, which came out, at least was made reference in like 7 or 8 different episodes throughout the series.
Okay, that's true. So
you're just more optimistic than I am.
So that whole catch up gets interrupted by, I forgot what they were called, but the Saurons.
So we get a dinosaur charge, and they literally look like Gallimimus from Jurassic Park, the ones that are chased by the T-Rex.
Oh, okay.
It may be a different kind of dinosaur, but they're also not hyper scientific with their dinosaur designs in this show.
Yeah, they're kind of just roughly Jurassic Park.
They also don't call anything by the right names,
right.
like literally Triceratops is 3 horns. So these are skinny runner dinos.
There you go.
Skinny runners.
Not copyright infringement dinos.
And then what happens here that is an iconic X-Men moment, Rod?
I'm trying to think of which one.
So this is the first time in the series we get a reference to the fastball special, which is normally Wolverine and Colossus. And essentially it is because Wolverine is smaller than other people, despite the fact that he's, literally made of metal in a brick shithouse, he gets thrown into an attack scenario by one of the other X-Men.
Oh, nice.
The funny thing is the way that Beast throws him, it's kind of like an underhand, like alley-oop over the shoulder.
Yeah.
Whereas the fastball special is like, oh no, you're throwing Wolverine like he's a fucking baseball.
Yeah, like track and field.
I mean, literally fastball like baseball,
Yeah,
fastball.
That's
So
awesome. Sauron's the last one to arrive with his army, and Rogue confronts him and literally just like lures him above the clouds so it's too cold, because at the end of the day he's still like reptilian.
yeah, he's cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Do you think his blood changes as he transforms? Like as Carl, he's warm-blooded and then he switches?
It sounds like it does based on what happened here.
Yeah.
But also I can't stand the sight of blood, and it makes my skin crawl thinking about your blood changing forms. Oh my god.
It's just how you handle heat. It's not a form, but well, I almost made Rod throw up, and it only took 30 episodes.
On the way down, Sauron tries to hypnotize Rogue, but she's like, "Not this time. Not going to look at you." And so Sauron, by this point he's still kind of like, he's weakened by being up above the clouds and stuff. So he zaps or starts absorbing one of the Pteranodons just enough so he can like continue to fly.
Right.
Jubilee catches him, zaps Sauron out of the sky. He crash lands, and then there's like a mini avalanche, and some rocks like cover him. Jubilee gets referenced as a whelp again, which now I'm aware of.
That name. It's not a slur at this point,
or just that it's not like I just always assume it's like, well, guess I'm gonna, I just didn't know this was like the usage for it for
child.
Yeah, like not a derogatory term, but like not like a.
It's a condescending term.
Yeah, it's condescending term for a kid, basically.
Absolutely, I call all children whelps.
I'm just gonna start.
I mean, don't do it in front of their parents; they don't appreciate it.
Well, if they understand it, I didn't.
Pretty sure if you go up to a random person and say whelp about their kid, whether or not they understand it, they're not going to think that's a compliment.
Stay tuned for Cyclops Waiting For Me prank channel.
Cannot emphasize this enough. No, you will not ever see that.
Anyway, so catching up with Zaladane, because we haven't seen her in 30 seconds. She's at a Garrock statue. Garrock says the time has come and to release the Weather Witch. So Zaladane goes to Storm, which is apparently like just off camera, and unshackles her. Storm immediately goes berserk. Then we catch up with Carl. Carl is crawling out of the rocks that Sauron was covered by. I didn't realize it until I saw the scene, but Ka-Zar hasn't seen that transformation yet.
So he doesn't actually realize that Carl is Sauron.
Yeah, so he immediately recognizes Carl. I think
Wolverine's ready to go at him.
Yeah.
Like, this is the first time where I feel like Wolverine has just been ready to off somebody.
Right.
Like, don't get me wrong. There have been times where Wolverine has fought people and it looks like, oh, that maybe could be fatal. This is a dude who is down.
Yeah.
and Wolverine has the claws out. At that point,
like to his neck.
Yeah, like at that point, that is not a debatable of like, oh, he's gonna capture him. It's like if you have claws out when the dude is defenseless, you are gonna go for it.
Yeah. And so,
which, depending on the Wolverine writer, might have been a thing,
right? Just right through the throat.
I mean, there are some dark issues of Wolverine where he just does not care and goes for it.
But Ka-Zar vouches for him and says, like, no, Carl otherwise is a good man. You know, we don't know much more than that.
He basically does say this is Sinister's fault. So the blame isn't on Carl for being Sauron and the choices Sauron is making, but something with the manipulation of Sinister is what has
turned him into this Jekyll and Hyde werewolf thing.
Right. And then there's a conversation that very briefly happens about having expertise in human mutation.
Yeah.
And that was interesting because it's like there are the people who are born mutants because of the X gene, and then there are people who end up going through like physical changes, and they refer to that as the human mutation, which in the comics, you know, it could be everything from the gamma radiation for Bruce Banner, the super government drugs that they give Captain America, the radioactive spider bite. Like that, it's in the comics. They stopped using the word mutation there to prevent the two from being confused.
Yeah,
but here they still utilized it.
I've noticed, like, especially in like more current day superhero stuff in the Marvel universe, they start referring to overall people like as enhanced humans. Because they don't quite know, like, alien, like this, like what, you know, like.
Well, also at the time, you know, when they started using enhanced, it was enhanced individuals.
Yes.
It was also when they did not have the full X-Men rights back from Fox.
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to do is lend credence to the word mutant or mutation when you don't even own that at the point.
I was thinking of, as of recording this, we're a couple episodes into Miss Marvel, the Disney Plus show,
right?
And there's a reference to her as an enhanced human. So I think part of it also is like kind of like leaving the surprises to like, are they going to stick with the Inhuman, you know, origin story, or mutant, or super soldier?
They're not going to do mutant with her.
Yeah.
There's already an uproar about her about it not being clearly inhuman at this point.
Yeah.
So there is no way they are touching mutant with that one.
I've heard an interesting theory about the Inhuman transformation that we'll see by the time you guys listen to this, that it'll have been revealed, but
it'll have been over by at least a month and a half at this point. So yeah.
But I hope that actually, fuck it, I'll say it here. So supposedly the one of the theories I've seen that's running around is that this whole thing with Miss Marvel is that the hard light stuff is part of the cocoon, like symbolically.
The Terrigen.
Yeah, the Terrigen cocoon and everything. So this is not her final power set, but like the hard light is probably going to contribute to her transformation to the final version that we're going to see in the Marvels down the road. So I don't know. Anyway, all that tangent to go on to there's enhanced humans.
Back to the show. Speaking of a enhanced human by mutation, we have Storm, who we end the episode with Storm being revealed to her teammates as being under the full unleashed version. She loses her shit, and we get the most 1994 animated to be continued CG I've ever seen. It's actually worse than the coming soon Phoenix saga.
I was genuinely confused for about like 3 seconds because each word comes out one at a time from behind a cloud. So we just hear Storm screaming. It looks like it freezes. I actually thought my Disney Plus froze because, you know, the frame rate got to be like 1 frame a second.
Yeah, it did the Magneto frame rate.
And then the word "to" like flies out like word art from behind the thing. I was like, "What is that? What character is that?" Then I noticed it was a word, and then by the time, you know, B came out, I was like, "Oh my god, they're going for it."
At the time, that was legitimately cutting edge, though.
Yeah.
Because remember, we didn't even start doing like PowerPoints until we were in high school.
Yeah.
And that was our first time of basically the word slowly moving in front of the screen.
So, not much of a cliffhanger because we're going to go right into it after that epic 3D to be continued from Microsoft Office, probably.
There was no way that was Office. Dude, that probably cost them half the budget of the episode.
Right.
At the time.
But other than the to be continued, we pretty much pick up at the same moment. Storm's freaking out and she's going nuts, and Carl clarifies that she's acting the way she is because Sauron had hypnotized her to like unleash all her emotions. Specifically
taken away her self-control.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, if Storm wasn't a moral and ethical person, this is what she could be doing.
And this is what how she's really feeling. Well, because like, it
would be great if she just shot Jubilee rapid fire.
Right.
It's like, child, bam.
Because there's a couple times that she says something like "get back," that she's kind of like whisks people away with tornado. It kind of gave me a little bit of shades of mild spoilers, but not really for Multiverse of Madness.
We are wit.
Yeah, we're so out of the window.
This is publishing in August.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Multiverse of Madness, this is your fault at this point.
Yeah, it kind of gives me shades of like when Strange is confronting Wanda and it's like, "Why'd you do all this crazy shit?" And she's like, "That was me being reasonable." Like, this kind of gives me the shade of that. Like, what happens when you take away like Storm's reason?
I could see that,
but
totally.
But they did that with Cyclops too, and Professor Xavier. Feels like this is like a theme. Like, all these characters have some level of control. We're only seeing like a fraction of their potential.
Right. Yeah, and this is the season where people are breaking for the first time, and I don't mean that in like a disparaging way, but you're seeing like what happens when people have been pushed too far. And granted, it took hypnosis for that to happen to Storm, but the others, it's like, oh, Cyclops Unleashed is literally talking back to teacher.
Yeah. And calling everybody else, like, what was like?
Petulant children.
Yeah, speaking of petulant children, Jubilee decides she wants to call herself Jubilee of the Jungle, and she goes for it. She goes to try to like stop Storm. Wolverine goes full dad mode. And he's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And
I really wish that was the exact quote. But yeah, Storm is unleashing hell. And then I wrote it in Savage Land speak instead of like actual dinosaur names. She tries to drown a baby Longneck.
Oh, God. Yeah, because my note was like, there was almost a Land Before Time moment.
Yeah.
Reverse.
Which is, they call them Longnecks in that movie,
I
believe. Yeah. Which, for a normal person, we're talking about brontosauruses.
Yeah, so the baby almost drowns in the mother, or I'm assuming the mother. One of the parent brontosaurus, like, saves it.
Which, I don't want to go the actually route, but the jaw of that kind of dinosaur would not be able to pick up the weight of that fat baby dinosaur.
Because they're, like, vegetarians, basically.
Aside from that, that is an absurd amount of strength to have in that jaw.
Yeah, because that's essentially, like, an elephant, right? Or
right.
more.
Yeah, you're picking up a fat elephant.
So Garak says he's stronger because Storm is doing all this crazy stuff with the weather. Storm actually zaps the statue that we've been seeing Zaladane speaking to, and it looks like destroys the statue. But then, like, as Zaladane's freaking out, it starts like reabsorbing into the ground.
Yeah, it kind of melts, and then you get this like gray stone that starts spreading throughout the land,
which is why the Petrified Man title that he had in the comics makes a little bit more sense, because it does look like he's like petrifying the forest,
right? And having not remembered that Garak was a character in and of himself, I at this point was still like, oh, is Garak just Sinister? Because the last time we saw Sinister was him exploding and the rocks absorbing into like the atmosphere.
Yeah, I really thought, like I had mentioned earlier, that this was going to be a reveal for Sinister or like Apocalypse coming back. Apocalypse, just kind of because the statue like looked like his face, like one of the versions,
I could see that.
It had that really strong jawline.
Yeah, it had a strong jawline, but it didn't have the strong lips, which are very iconic to Apocalypse. And you know what? I'll share this on social media. I'll find a bunch of different versions of Apocalypse, but one thing that is ever present is essentially where his jaw and over his lips is a dividal, like it's literally divided and has like its own organic aspect to it, that it's like, oh, you literally know any drawing of Apocalypse just because you see this line that goes from his cheeks and over his lips.
Yeah, it looks almost like it would have been like robotic, but it's not. It's like you said, it's organic to him.
Yeah, well, as organic as Apocalypse can be.
Yes.
Right.
So Zaladane says it has begun. Storm's going crazy and everything. Actually starts some dinosaurs to start to stampede. And then we cut back to the rest of the X-Men are just trying, and Ka-Zar all just trying to like figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yep.
And the stampede actually comes at them. And so they hide in a cave.
I did love this moment because this was one of those like classic era of the 90s where you have a bunch of different species that are all just like clumped together.
Yeah.
And these are things that like one would normally be running from the other.
Yeah.
And it just is like, it's a very Looney Tunes kind of scene to me.
Yeah, they were all, it was like a Stegosaurus with a T-Rex with a Brontosaurus.
And then there was like an Ankylosaurus at the back end.
And they're all running at the same rate.
Yeah, and then there was a great Wolverine quote where he talks about Barbados, but he doesn't say it Barbados. He calls it Barbados.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, Rogue says, like, well, I can absorb Storm's powers.
Right.
And stuff to, like, calm her down. And that's when Wolverine, is like, do we want to mess up the weather from here to Barbados? And which I don't think that's a Canadian thing. So that's really, like, good.
It's got to be a Canadian thing.
But
because either way, whether that's intentional Canadian or that's just Wolverine is Canadian, it was still nobody has ever called it Barbados that lives in the United States.
he makes a good point. She's the master of all this shit that's going on, and she can't control. Like, you're going to do much worse at controlling.
We've seen what happens when you absorb people's powers. Carol Danvers has been in a coma for years.
Right? And then 180, Carl's like, I can do it. And Wolverine's like, what did I just say? And Beast even mentions like, well, if he had ill intentions, he would have done it by now because he's with a bunch of mutants. And then everybody just kind of agrees.
Well, and I also think a part of that is whether or not they said it. It's like, okay, well, if you absorb her, we're kind of holding back because we don't want to kill our friend.
Yeah.
Wolverine has already almost killed this guy within the last like 25 minutes of real time at this point. So he has no problem putting like a puncture hole through his head.
Yeah. And Carl has gone out to say that he is ready to like be punished for what he perceives as his sins.
Well, and the other good part about it is for Carl, if he's the one that absorbs it, he makes himself more powerful, but he doesn't clone the power of the person he's absorbing. Whereas to Wolverine's Barbados point, if Rogue got that, she's controlling all the weather with no experience.
Yeah. And so, nobody loves the idea. Like, it's not a good idea, but it's the best one they have. So they decided to go for it. There's some undetermined amount of time where we see them actually executing the plan. So they got a catapult at some point.
There are catapults all over the Savage Land, dude.
And they shoot a fire rock at Storm. I don't know what it's called. It's a rock that's on fire.
It's a fire rock.
Fire rock.
That's a scientific term.
To distract Storm. Meanwhile, behind Storm, Rogue is flying up with Carl. Carl grabs Storm's head to absorb her powers.
As he does that, he begins doing the transformation back into being Sauron. And when Sauron takes control, Sauron refuses to release.
Yeah, because they're yelling like let her go, and it's like nope. Rogue actually even tries to reason with Sauron for a second and says, "Are you going to help us with our friend or not?" And then Sauron's reaction is he tries to absorb Rogue, and there's this weird freak out short circuit moment.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop essentially where you have two people with matching powers, and Rogue starts transforming, and then he's transforming, and they keep going back and forth, and essentially they cancel each other out.
Yeah. And so she falls to the ground, and she basically says that she's like, because I actually like the way she said it, because they're like, what happened up there? She's like, it was weird.
It was real weird. Then we also see the Garrock stone continue to spread throughout the ground.
Mm-hmm. The petrification is still happening. That's what I kind of wish they would have called him like the Petrified Man, or like made a reference to it.
Nope.
Because that would make sense in this case,
Nope. Sun God.
Yeah, Sun God that turns the ground gray. Sure.
Turns it back. Yep.
Turns the ground gray.
There you go.
Let's just say that as a speaking exercise.
No. I'd rather not, sir.
So back at the Blackbird next to the village, Beast is tending to Storm, which just means he sedated her. And Rogue describing her situation when she
was in Sauron's thoughts,
and said that she just kept hearing the name Zaladane,
which Ka-Zar recognizes.
Yeah, is the priestess of Garrock. And Storm wakes up and just not freak out power-wise, but is like very vocally dramatic. And says,
something is very wrong.
Yeah, nature's out of balance. Evil in this land must be purged. And she zaps the statue that's in the middle of the village.
Which all the cave people probably not too thrilled about.
Yeah, because they're literally bowing at it at that moment.
Yeah, that would be the equivalent of going into any house of worship and destroying their most well-known iconography.
Yeah,
like it is
or something.
Yeah, there's no example I want to say out loud because it's no matter what scenario it's the most offensive thing you could do to a believer.
Yeah, it says whatever the central point of a house of worship is. Like, that's basically what she did. Then, so Storm starts to begin to freak out again, and Rogue tries to stop her, gets blown away by like a mini tornado thing. Jubilee and Wolverine are able to hold her back long enough for Beast to trank her again.
I love how just Beast has this new backpack.
The arm.
With the arm, and just has drugs.
Beast is a drug dealer. That's how he's making all this work.
Beast is a drug dealer.
Yeah. He has the arms. He doesn't touch it.
We're going to have a separate conversation about Beast off the podcast because I got to tell you some other shit Beast has done recently.
Nice.
Sauron, who has made his way back to Zaladane.
Yeah, who's that? I'm going to guess another statue of Garrock that's not destroyed.
Right. There was a throwaway line that, a bunch of these altars and heads started popping up throughout the Savage Land. Like, some of them are full-fledged, like, heads that pop up. Some of them are just, like, the face in the ground looking up at the sky, like when we saw the view from the Blackbird earlier.
And Sauron tells Zaladin to rally the troops and stuff, but she says that Garrock told her that Sauron has outlived his usefulness. And so Sauron is like, Garrock's just is not real and blah, blah, blah. And the statue speaks back and is like, is this real? And then like some like stone.
It was a great like fuck you moment.
Yeah.
Like for Garrock, it was like, oh, I'm not real, bitch. I hear you.
And then these like stone vines come out and bind Sauron. But even in the middle of Sauron being bound up, he's like, you're not real.
We never said that Sauron was the smartest character. He's super. Here's the thing. He hits that level of like, you could be really, really powerful and you don't need to be super duper smart.
I guess he literally has a bird brain.
I mean, he's what would happen if Avalanche had direction. Because Avalanche should be able to take out tons and tons of people, but he's a doofus.
Yeah. He's following Pyro around, who's following Mystique.
And Blob is just eating Tutti Frutti.
Yeah. So after the statue or Garrock binds Sauron, he decides this is the time for the villain monologue. So we get the exposition dump of what happened. So Garrock was like a humanoid god, essentially, or at least an enhanced human or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think for purposes of this, he was a powered being, whatever phrasing we want to talk about it. But in Marvel, whether it's the comics or this animated series, we know there have been beings before the X-Men who had mutant powers and things similar. I mean, just for the fact that we know Doctor Strange is a character in this world, just for the fact that we know Apocalypse has been around for centuries.
Yeah.
So he may be, we don't know, could he be an Eternal or a deviant or something along those lines?
Or something, whatever Apocalypse is.
Right.
Something similar.
Could he be the first mutant?
He talked about how he once ruled the Savage Land until someone disrupted it. He doesn't say it, but it's basically the High Evolutionary comes. And he doesn't even really show what he does, but he says he got banished and imprisoned in like the rocks, apparently.
By the way, I just want to point out that I am so proud of Rod that he knew who the High Evolutionary was, despite the fact that the character's name has never once been said in the animated series.
I only know it because of all the Doctor Strange stuff that's been around in the past couple of years, the whole like Wonder Gore storyline. I'm just like vaguely familiar with like the characters in that, so...
I have literally had to tell you Maverick's name on 4 separate occasions. Yeah. So the fact that you knew Evolutionary, I'm legitimately proud.
I don't know what he does.
I don't care if you know who you knew from the visual who he was.
I'm assuming it wasn't Zemo. It was between him and Zemo, the purple mask.
There's every ounce of pride that I had is gone from that one sentence.
But yeah, I deduced it though, right? So it's like, well, Zemo wouldn't be in the Savage Land. Okay. So it's him. Anyway.
He literally says thousands of years, Rod.
Yeah. Then Garrock says he lay dormant for thousands of years in like the rocks and the earth and stuff. And he says he was yearned for, and they show like footage of him being like worshipped and stuff. And then he says until, and they basically flash back to the last time we were in the Savage Land. That was a little bit confusing to me because it was like, were you forgotten? Like,
well, at one point in regular human history, you had entities who were considered gods, and then over time, the evolution of religions happened, and like not many people still consider the Egyptians gods to actually be gods, the Greek gods to be gods. Those became myth more than religion. Yeah. So to the point where Ka-Zar and Karl / Sauron are saying, well, he's just a myth. So there's still people who reference him, but the power kind of wanes as people stop believing in them.
Yeah. So it just like kind of faded over the history. It skipped ahead a lot because it went from like thousands of years ago to like when the X-Men visited their last.
Well, because what else are you going to do? Like 7 cavemen started worshiping me.
Yeah. So we're
going to see those saves like generations of 7 cavemen who didn't forget the name and Zaladin.
Yes. Yeah, that's another. I guess she didn't age. I don't need to know about her. She doesn't do very much.
Nope.
So we basically see a recap of the last Savage Land episodes, and
which is our finales for season 2.
Yeah, and it basically kind of says that the events of that, but especially Storm using all her weather powers and stuff.
Particularly, the phrasing was elemental energy woke him.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So like just all that stirring up woke him up and kind of gave him like the motivation to give it a good college try to exist again.
It also gave him a little bit of that re-energizing, not in like a motivational sense, but I think there was actual physical energy that was generated from what she was doing during that fight with Sinister.
Gotcha. And then he explains that under the volcanoes, I took it as just magma, but there was also like a bunch of machinery down there that like maintains the Savage Land's climate.
Yes.
That was a little bit of a cognitive dissonance to me because they're portraying all the Savage Land people as basically cavemen, but also there's like an immense amount of technology.
Well,
under the volcanoes.
Well, I'll jump back in one second, but with regard to the technology, that gives us some sort of like, there is stuff going on about the Savage Land that made it hospitable for these cave people to live on, not that the cave people were the ones who built it.
Oh, okay.
So I think like that's the like, oh, was it the Celestials or an ancient society or something like that? He also points out he was the one that specifically gave Sauron the yearning to go after Storm. Because if I think that's where to, you know, even though I don't think it was mind control, it was the suggestion of that rock pendant on his chest. Because he wasn't in full control of Sauron, because obviously Sauron is like, oh, I'm just going to use Zaladane and get my own army. But it was like, I'm going to nudge you in this direction a little bit.
Yeah. And so Garrock wants to fuse with that energy system of the volcano so that he can like basically take over the world, or at the very least the Savage Land again. Back at the village, Storm is begging Rogue to restrain her or do something. There's an earthquake.
Which is great because it's kind of like a little bit of an inverse of their previous conversation where Storm is like, oh, I keep myself restrained.
Yeah.
This is, I've lost that level of control. I literally need you to restrain me because I can't do it anymore.
At one of these scenes where Rogue is tending to Storm, she even says like, and I was telling you to let go. Like,
I think this might have been that scene. Yeah.
She's like, shows what I know.
Yeah. Never listen to Rogue's life advice.
So there was an earthquake starting, and we find out it's from Garrock emerging out of a mountain.
Yep.
The ground starts ripping open. Garrock says that the age of Garrock begins anew, and the way they cut away from him emerging out of the mountain made me think they're going to see like 3 stories rock dong, because like he's right before his waist cuts the camera framing or whatever. Like it just cuts, and I'm like, poor X-Men. But then like they do show him emerge completely, and he's magically got pants on. That's very considerate of him.
So I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm going to put this into the polls on Spotify and stuff like that. Let us know if you would like one episode of this show with full video, because there are times Rod says shit like this that I just bury my hands, like my face in my hands. And it's like we edit it out because we want to remove the awkward pauses. But I don't think you guys know when Rock starts talking about giant rock dick, how much I just look at him with like disdain. So let us know if you want to see that.
There you go. Or you can just leave it on loop. And that's pretty much how the podcast goes. Anyway, so we don't see that. He's got pants on. That's part of his emergence, I guess.
Right.
Then the hands start coming out of the ground and like grabs Jubilee, and like nothing's really hurting him, but then Wolverine's claws, I guess because of the adamantium.
Yeah,
like,
Wolverine's basically like, see what these babies can do.
Yeah, so I took it as like kind of basically cutting a tentacle off a monster or something. Like it hurt him and froze him, like kind of stalled him for a moment, but eventually he was going to like kind of repopulate all that.
Yeah, it was very similar to the fight from the Phoenix Saga episodes where Ken was like, you know, growing into this giant gem beast, and it was like, oh, you guys took him down, but he was able to like reform himself. Yeah. You weren't cutting it off at the source. You were just, you know, kind of like a Hydra scenario.
Yeah. And then we catch up with Storm again, and she's waking up because of all the craziness that's happening.
Yeah, we didn't really, I don't know if we're really catching up with her as much as we're seeing her really fucked in a house right now.
Yeah, because the house becomes part of like the gray thing that Garrock has taken over, petrified, and is like closing in on her. So he must have some awareness of her claustrophobia, because it's specifically what he's doing to the house, is like closing the walls in on her.
Well, I think this is the first time where we see it being more than just like the plants and the trees and stuff like that. But he is like literally also causing earthquakes. So there is a destructive nature to what Garrock is doing. So it's like, oh, your house? Fuck your house.
Yeah, right? And so she starts going berserk again, because she's like, this evil must be stopped, and she there isn't really a claustrophobic moment. She just starts being afraid of it at the beginning before she goes crazy again.
Right.
And as she's like just like letting loose all her weather powers, Garrock just keeps egging her on to try to get her to use more and more of her powers. And Beast figures it out, or at least has a theory, and the radios Storm and is like, you need to cut the shit out, Storm. And she refuses. She's like, I gotta destroy him.
Well, she starts out by freezing him, and then Beast is the one who figures it's geoenergy. So instead of stopping, well, freezing isn't working, so I'm going to switch to heat, and that absolutely strengthens Garak. And this is where there was like my animation blip that I saw in the episode where Storm's excommunicator patches literally just disappeared from her outfit.
Just invisibility when they're activated. I don't know.
Yeah, when Storm loses her shit, they actually turn off her powers so they don't get bad PR.
There you go. Yes, there's no more X branding.
Yeah. They learned from Bobby in the previous episode.
Yeah. we need to take that back if we're going to geek out team. So if we've forgotten, Sauron was bound up in those like stone vines or whatever.
And the lightning is actually what helps break him out from those.
So he breaks out of them. He goes to hypnotize Aladdin, basically just puts her to sleep. She passes out.
I want that power. I don't want to control people. Controlling people would be fucked up. But if it's like, I'm in a bad argument and I don't want to deal with your shit, I'm just going to be like, you can go to sleep right now. And I'm just going to walk away.
Did you ever watch when Cracked did those things at the...
Literally, whatever the end of that sentence is, the answer is no.
Well, they used to have these like kind of hypothetical conversations at a diner over in Los Feliz. And one of them...
Oh, actually, that show I did love.
Yes, I love that show.
Yes.
So there was one about like what superpower you want. Spoiler for a show that's not around anymore.
The show has been canceled for over 3 years, Rod.
So basically, they were like, they arrived at the conclusion that you want to be Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. You can pause moments.
Yep, you could do the timeout.
Because everything else, like flying, all that shit, like you need oxygen, all these things. But yeah, timing out for like 5 seconds or whatever, game changer for your life, right?
Yep.
Anyway, so Sauron gets away.
Sauron times out Zaladin.
Right. And right then, Garak rises out of the volcano because he's like made it to the volcano by now because Storm is still like going crazy and everything. Right. Sauron decides to go after him because he thinks he can take him. I guess he just gets really confident. Like once again, you said like not the smartest.
He's got a literal lizard brain. Yeah. That's not a compliment.
And so he runs up to the side of, I guess, another volcano.
One of the volcanoes. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, at the edge of it, and like starts absorbing the power out of the magma, which I didn't know that's how his powers work, but sure. I guess it's part of Garak now.
I think because it's part of Garak, because it's specifically animated to look like something other than what was already there.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the life essence absorption. So if a human just gives him a little bit of like a hit, like he's doing a whip it, and then a mutant is like Coke, this is like him doing ayahuasca because he literally turns into a kaiju from absorbing the power from this.
And this was kind of confusing. This must have been cut for time because it just kind of happens and you think you're going to see this big epic kaiju battle and it literally just starts and then just ends.
I'm happy we didn't get the big kaiju battle because I didn't like the big kaiju battle in Moon Knight.
That's right. Yeah, you're not a big fan. I'm always down for like Pacific Rim. I'm always down for like robots and kaijus fighting.
Pacific Rim, really good.
Yeah.
Pacific Rim movie sequel, not as good.
No.
Pacific Rim on Netflix should never have happened.
I didn't even know that existed.
It's a cartoon version.
Oh.
We'll talk.
So it's whatever, but we didn't get to see that here. They just kind of like start fighting
and they start eye blasting each other essentially.
Yeah, that sounds dirtier than it actually is.
Okay, we're going to do a future episode that's going to be recorded on video. Yeah. There's no way we don't.
And then it just like zooms out to like an outer space view, and the explosion was so large that it's able to be seen from space.
And there's a ship in space that's like actually observing it too.
Yeah,
and I didn't know if that was a throwback to the blip of the space from the previous episode.
Yeah, a little Easter egg.
I don't know. We'll find out in the Dark Phoenix episodes, I guess.
There you go. Stay tuned for those. And then back on the ground, even though the explosion was so large you could see it from space, everyone survives.
But Storm and Rogue were actually caught within like the blast radius. It gives you the impression.
Well, technically all of them were in the blast radius, right? Because you could see the imprint from space.
Yeah, but they were closer. They were worried that Storm and Rogue were actually dead.
Yeah. And so
because they had to like dig them out.
Yeah, they found him under some rubble. It looks like Rogue kind of like shielded Storm. And
well, yeah, I mean, she's literally invincible.
Yeah. And Storm was knocked out, and so they get them and take Storm back to the Blackbird med bay, which I guess is a thing. That makes sense. It's just all these like new things that appear when they need them. Then there's like this comedically cartoon moment. Garak's like statue head is like on its side. Aladdin's like laying on the ground, and he was like, "I was so close," and I was just waiting for the musical cue, like the wah 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 or something, because it was that moment. He was like, "I was so close," like,
but he sounded like a dying robot.
Yeah,
yeah.
And once again, the X-Men are just like, we're just going to leave him because who knows? We might be bored one day and want to fight him again.
And we find out that Carl survived.
Yeah.
And he finally breaks the Garruk charm that has been on him this entire time. You would have thought he would have broken that earlier, but no.
Yeah, and I think it is like a little tiny detail when Ka-Zar finds him. It's like he gives him like a little hit. Because when they shake hands, it's like a little zap. He's like, here you go, bud. You have a little bit of my life force. That sounds dirty too.
Yep.
And then in the Blackbird, Storm is asking Rogue for forgiveness.
Right.
She sounds really distressed. Actually, even as corny as it was, I felt bad for Storm because she's just really pitiful at that moment.
She's like, this was not what I was expecting to do on our trip to Central Park, basically.
And then Rogue is like, shut the fuck up.
But it ends on one of the. It's weird to say because this series has lots of ups and downs with like highs and lows, and like we literally saw a few episodes ago, Beast is shedding a tear over a robotic or the ship of like, so this is one of the more dark ones, whereas like the Beast moment was sad. This is like, oh yeah, I kind of liked letting go and being free. And it's like, oh, did Storm just acknowledge that she loves like letting loose and just like destroying shit?
I get it. Like you have that kind of power, and you just know that you can't ever be 100% because if you are, like, you might destroy civilization.
It's true. It's
like, it's not that maybe she doesn't want to hurt people, but she's like, I kind of want to see like more lightning bolts. Like, what happens when that, So it was a weird ending. She was like, I liked it.
So we are through our episode, Rod. Despite before this started, you and I saying there wasn't a lot that went on, we ended up having a lot to talk about.
Yeah, a lot of tangents, but it was fun. It was a pretty straightforward episode. It was nice to go to Savage Land again. It feels like this one actually did contribute to the overall story, unlike some of the Mojo Vision stuff.
It definitely forwarded it. We got the reference to what's going on with Jean, which we are going to talk about in our next. I think we're going to do it as 2 episodes. Don't hold me to that, though, because who knows, once we actually start recording, where we're going to get into the Dark Phoenix saga. We also are happy to say we have a collab that is going to be on the YouTube channel with our buddy Matt Robb. We are doing the HeroClix The Dark Phoenix Saga unboxing. So you'll be able to see video of that on the YouTube channel for Cyclops is Waiting for Me podcast.
And me get a concussion from John throwing a box at my head.
You don't see the concussion, though. There's certain things on this channel that happen off camera.
But they were cool figures. I'll vouch for that, so you want to see that. All right, well, thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them in the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post and this episode. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and CastBox.
I was so close.
You gotta say more pitiful.
I was pretty pitiful there, Rod.